Good afternoon, everyone. Country Flyboy here, and today, stars. Okay, so another video in the reading charts tutorial. This one we're going to be covering stars. Now, I got the low en route chart for the Jacksonville area pulled up, and I'm on skyvector.com. I want to show you why Skyvector is one of my favorite websites to use for looking at charts. If you right-click over an airport, and you can add to your plan, it'll also have a hyperlink for that airport's name. If you click on the airport's name, it brings you to a web page with information about that airport. And you see it has everything. It has the fuel prices for both FBOs, has an image and a date for that image, has the diagram, the charts. You can go right back to the VFR chart or the IFR chart. You can also get a satellite view. Also has airport information such as it's open to the public, it's activated on November 1968, what ARTCC is it under, segmented circle, beacon light, all that stuff, communication frequencies. He also has runway dimensions and weight bearing limits, as well as edge lighting, approach lighting, marking information, all that fun stuff. But you can also hover your mouse over this box over here and get a cutout view of the airport facility directory for that airport. Now, this is what real-world pilots use when they're flight planning. They use the AFD. So this is useful to have, a little cutout of it. But they also have the charts down here at the bottom. I got the charts pulled up that we're going to use in this video already. So we can see they have the weather minimums, which is takeoff and alternate minimums, as well as the stars, approaches, and departure procedures. And again, as mentioned in our SIDS video, departure procedures are also in the takeoff minimums if they're not SIDS. ODPs are in the takeoff minimums, not the departure procedures section. Also nearby airports with instrument procedures. Very useful website. And I've pulled up the charts we're going to need. The only thing I don't like is they got each page of a chart on the approach as its own thing. So if you wanted to bring up the OTA1 R-NAV, there's two pages of that. You have to bring up both the OTA1 R-NAV and the OTA1 R-NAV continued to get both the graphical layout and the text. I don't like that. I wish they would combine them into one page. So I usually use FlightAware for looking at charts because of that reason. It's just convenient to have them on both together. Alright, so enough talking about Skyvector and giving them free advertising. Let's look at stars. So, unlike SIDS, stars are just stars. SIDS we divide that up into ODPs, diverse departures, as well as R-NAV and pilot NAV and hybrid SIDS. Stars, there's two subcategories of stars, R-NAV and pilot NAV, just like SIDS. But there's no other type of arrival procedure that I know of, other than, say, the feeder route for an approach, which I consider that part of the approach, not an arrival. So what is a star? You can think of a star as the off-ramp. If you think of departure procedures as your on-ramp to getting onto the airways, and think of the airways as your major highways, your interstates, then the stars would be the R-NAV. The stars would be the off-ramp. And that's what a star is. So real quick, let's bring up PowerPoint. And I want to show you this. Let me get that out the way. Say this is an airport, and these blue lines indicate their departure gates. Airports served by TRACONs, they always have departure gates. These gates are not charted. They're for ATC purposes. What these are the gates that aircraft are going to be flying out of when they depart the airfield. So whenever ATC gives radar vectors to fly to get them away from the airfield, they're taking you to the departure gate. And conversely, there's also arrival gates. And these are custom made for every airport where the gates are, but you always have the four gates for the cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. Those gates are at every airfield. Now, SIDS can be like that. They will show you where the other, not really show you, but they take you to the departure gates. So you got these blue ones here, your cardinal direction departure gates, and you also have the SIDS taking you to their various departure gates. And you can see how there's no gates going to this direction. They all go here, here, and here. So yeah, stars are the exact opposite. So if you can just picture these lines facing the other way. Instead of taking you away, they take you in. Now stars will not take you 100% all the way to the airport. And you can find the airport on a star. You can see what airports it serves by looking for this little crosshair symbol, circle with a crosshair. You can see it on this one. It varies, but this is what you're looking for. These will show you the airports that the star serves. Like this star serves multiple airports in the Jacksonville terminal area. Sorry. So it doesn't just serve Jackson International, it also serves Mayport, Craig, NAS, and Cecil. Now I got the hiccups, great. This one, on the other hand, only shows one airport, and it's not named. So as you can see, this one, Jacksonville, Florida, down there at the bottom in the margins, it tells you the area it serves, Jacksonville, Florida. This one, Jacksonville International, Jacksonville, Florida, and there's only one airport here. So that means this star serves only Jacksonville International. It does not serve Craig, NAS, or any of those others. So this is an R-NAV star right here. This is a pilot nav star. And this is an approach plate that we'll get into later. So what is a star? It's a way of taking you into an airfield. It doesn't take you directly to the airport. It drops you off close to the airport in a position where you could be brought onto an approach. Now, particularly with this star, this is the OTA 1 R-NAV star in the Jackson International. And I want you to note the endpoint for each transition on this star. CDOT, NAMP, CDOT, ORTAR, PPI, and OLECI. Note that the approach for the R-NAV RMP Yankee approach to runway 8, one of its transitions is an intermediate fix of CDOT, which corresponds to one of the waypoints here. So you can see this star starts at from. Note it does not start at Duchy or Finn. Those are transitions. We can tell they're transitions because the line here is thin. The bold line starts at from, so that's the beginning of the departure or the arrival. Is from, goes to OTA, and then Kipple, and from Kipple it splits off. And when you see a split off like this, or even like if the star splits at any waypoint, it's for either serving multiple airports, which this star doesn't, or the single airport with multiple operations. So if depending on which runway is in use at Jacksonville, we could get any one of these. And reading the text backs that up. From, track 153 to OTA, 147 to Kipple, cross Kipple between 7,000 and 11,000 at 250. Landing runway 8, we go from Kipple to Kaitso, then to CDOT. Expect radar vectors for the R-NAV, RNP, or visual approach as assigned by ATC. Runway 14, 26, and 32 all look very similar. They start at Kipple, but go to different waypoints depending on which runway is in use. And if you wanted to check, all of those endpoints on each runway direction correspond to an intermediate fix on one of the R-NAV approaches. So this is a very efficient procedure that ATC doesn't have to give you vectors. They basically just clear you for a particular path and then for a particular approach, and then they're done with you. So we'll cover how to pick which transition to get when flight planning, when I do those videos later. But note that since this is an R-NAV arrival, we couldn't fly this if we didn't have R-NAV equipment. The first thing you should check when you pull up a star to see if you can use it is the notations down here. And we note radar required. That does not mean onboard aircraft radar. That means the Jacksonville Airport's radar has to be operational in order to be cleared for this star. And it says R-NAV 1, meaning the aircraft has to be R-NAV equipped to fly this star. No, you can't use VORs for this, obviously, because it has no VORs depictions. You do not know where any of these waypoints are, because they're not relative to the VOR. They're just points in space. DME, IRU, or GPS required. That means you need a DME position updating, an inertial reference unit, and which is basically a flight management system, or a GPS in order to fly this star. The last notation, turbojet aircraft only. So we've read the notations when we're doing our flight planning. We see turbojet aircraft only. We can toss the star out. We're not a turbojet. So only jets are going to be getting this star. And if we click the other page, there's all the text. So let's go on to reading these. Well, let's start with the simplest one here, the pilot Navstar. This is just like a pilot nav SID, just in reverse. So as we mentioned in the en route video, I'm going to take this back to the en route chart. It uses the same notations as the en route charts. So here we see the minimum en route altitude is 10,000. There is that prong we talked about, that little bar, meaning the en route altitude, the minimum en route altitude has changed. It's now 8,000 from Oda to Craig. So how do we read this? Well, just like with every other plate or chart, we always check the margins first to make sure what we have. We have the ALMA to arrival, and this is right here is how they would want you to file it on a flight plan. So if you were filing this star on your flight plan, you would file .amg2. Note it has the AMG before the dot. That is just your transition. Which transition do you want? There's only one way to fly this star. There's no transitions for it. So AMG.AMG2 is how you would file this. Versus if you wanted to file this one, you see it says OTA.OTA1. OTA just refers to the common waypoint. You would actually file Ducci.OTA1 if you wanted the Ducci transition, or Fin.OTA1 if you wanted the Fin transition, or From.OTA1 if you wanted to start at From and not worry about these transitions, which you can do. So following the bold line, we start in ALMA, then the 157 course, which is also the 157 radial, out of ALMA, 36 miles to 10,000 feet. And that will get us to OTA. This 10,000 thing is just the minimum en route altitude. Just like with the en route charts, you do not have to be at that altitude, you just cannot be below it. So for whatever reason, they don't want us below 10,000 due to terrain, obstacles, or nav aid reception. So just like with an en route chart, you can't be below that altitude for nav aid reception, terrain, and obstacle separation. Next we have OTA. It gives us the GPS position, the latitude, longitude of it, and then it says turbojet vertical navigation planning information, expect 12,000. Two things I want to point out here. Turbojet vertical navigation planning information, meaning that if we're not a turbojet, we can throw that out entirely. We don't need to worry about the altitude they have here. All we need to worry about is that we are no lower than 10,000 at OTA, and we're probably going to want to descend lower after OTA since the en route altitude is 8,000 and we're starting to get close to the airfields. Now this 12,000, this is the altitude they're going to have you at. They're going to have, well, they may not. Remember, this is what you can expect and what you would use if you lost radio communication. However, ATC could have you at 13,000 or 14,000 or 11 or 10. They could have you at any altitude they need you at above the minimum vectoring altitude at this waypoint. Expect 12,000 just tells you that this is what you'd punch in the FMS beforehand until you got something different. Or if they cleared you to descend via the star, this is the altitude you would take. Now note the position of the bars. Here we have a line above 12,000 and a line below 12,000. That means they want us at exactly 12,000 or whatever altitude they cleared us for when we hit that waypoint. If you could just imagine this top line here wasn't there, that would mean they want us at 12,000 but no lower. So you see the 12,000 above the line, just ignore the line above 12 is not here, just the one below it. So you see the 12 is above the line, that means they want you 12,000 or higher. If the 12 is below the line, so now ignore the bottom one, then they want you at 12 or lower. So again, if the line is above the number, that's no higher than the number. If it's below the number, that's no lower than the number. Or at or below or at or above. So from OTA, let's say we are, let's just say for the sake of the argument, we are a jet. So we cross it at 12,000. And then we start tracking 139 on the 139 radial inbound which it has here is the 319 radial, notate there, to Craig. So we'd stop using ALMA, start using Craig, and we'd see this number. Again, can't descend until you're cleared, but we know we're going to get cleared for a descent at some point here because this inner altitude is lower, and we're getting close to the airports. And we know OTA is 54 miles from Craig, and it's on the 319 radial. So depending on which airport we get or taking, at some point they're going to take us off of this line and vector us for an approach to this airport. Or if we lost communications, let's say we were going to Cecil Field, we would fly this star all the way to Craig and then navigate from Craig to Cecil. And I know that Craig is one of the transitions for the arrivals into Cecil. So we could take one of the feeder route from Craig to an approach here. If we were landing at Jackson International, we could, from OTA, actually take a direct route to one of the take a direct route from one of the arrivals or approaches in the Jax or NAS. Or if we were landing Craig, we'd go straight to the Craig VOR and then get on one of the approaches to Craig. Same for Mayport. So at some point, we're either going to get radar vectors or be cleared for an approach, full procedure approach, along this line. So, and down here, we have the notes. Notes could be pretty much anywhere. They put them wherever they have room. So down here, we have a note, DME required. So we have to have DME to fly this. That's the only requirement. We could fly this if we had R-NAV equipment and no VORs. Well, actually, we still have to have DME. That's the only requirement. So if we had no VOR indications but somehow had DME, we could still fly this, even if we had R-NAV. We could fly this R-NAV or we can fly this VORs. So that's the only requirement. Then the other note is chart, not the scale. So this is not the scale. That just basically means you can't eyeball the distances between the waypoints. Below it, we have the text description, which is just a text version walking you through what's depicted up here. Sometimes it has extra information, such as right here when we get to Kipple, and we don't know which path to take. We know we have to read the text, and we can see that it varies depending on which runway is in use. So just read it from ALMA, VORTAC via ALMA radio 157 to OTA, then Craig radio 319 to Craig. Expect radar vectors to final approach course. All right, so that is that star. We talked about finding the path, what airports it serves, and we've talked on the vertical planning navigation. Again, if you see turbojet vertical navigation, that just means it's for turbojets only. So if you're not a turbojet, if you're not a jet, you're not going to have to worry about that. If it doesn't say turbojet vertical navigation, if it just says vertical navigation planning, then you may have to worry about it, because that means it's not exclusive to turbojets. They could give it to someone else. They could give it to you, even if you're in a prop. And we got helpful radio frequencies here as well. We can see that we'll be with center on this star until we get to OTA, because 54 miles, that's when they'll hand us off to approach, and they're going to hand us off to approach on 127.0. And that's the last frequency, because every other frequency listed is ATIS. So it tells us the ATIS frequency for the different airports that this star serves, and we would pick the one that we needed. Now let's look at this one. This is an R-NAV star. Real quick, let's look back at the navigation, the en route chart. So if we were arriving and we weren't in an R-NAV capable aircraft and we were arriving to an airport in the Jacksonville area from the north, we would plan for this star. We see that we can fly even though we don't have R-NAV equipment, and its one transition is ALMA. So our flight plan would have to get us to ALMA somehow if we wanted to use this star. And from there, we would just go straight to the airport as far as the en route chart is concerned, because we'd be flying this and getting vectors. So note that ALMA shows up on the en route chart, and it's also on here. How convenient. What about this one? Its transitions are Duchy, Finn, and From. Well, what do you know? Here's OTA, which would mean that From should be right around here near Itchy, And Ducci and Finn should be over here somewhere. They're not on the en route charts. Only Oda is. What that means is that backs up the fact that this is an R-NAV star, meaning you have to have R-NAV equipment to fly it, because since these waypoints don't appear on the en route charts, they're not relative to any VOR. Yeah. So you can the only way you can navigate to them is if you had R-NAV equipment. So let's go down this one, and we look again, similar symbology. Minimum en route altitude for these two legs, 5,000, and then it goes to 6,000, 4,000, 3,000. No minimum en route altitudes for these legs, curiously. It doesn't have them, but they're implied because you have these crossing restrictions. Oh, wait, we see several numbers here. We see a line above flight level 280, which means no higher than flight level 280. We see a line below flight level 250, meaning no lower than 250. What that means is they simply want us to cross Ducci between flight level 250 or flight level 280. So if we're up at 30,000 feet, center is going to clear us down to 280 before we get to Ducci. Or they're going to clear us for an altitude between these two numbers. So again, they'd want us to cross Kippel at between 7,000 and 11,000. And we see a notation here. There's the bar surrounding 280 knots, 280K. That means they want us at 280 knots when we reach ILTAC. The same with Kippel. Even if we're below 10,000 feet, they want us exactly at 250 when we cross Kippel. Some aircraft in flight sim, the autopilots and the FMS, like to hit 240 once below 10,000 to give you that 10-knot safety margin. Throw that out the window here because we see the lines is above and below this 250 knot indication. That means they want us at exactly 250 knots when we hit Kippel. And the same here, they want us at exactly 230 from here on, and 210 at Nana. So if we get told to descend via the star, just like with the SID, all that means is conform to the published crossing restrictions. So if we get told to descend via star, we would just cross Ducci between 250 and 280, ILTAC between 190 and 240, from between 10 and 13, Kippel between 7 and 11, and let's say we got runway 8, Kitso between 5 and 6, and CDOT at 3,000. If we look at the approach plate, CDOT 3,000, Garns to final approach fix, straight to runway 8. Oops. So yeah, that's all that means. Descend via star just means conform to the published crossing restrictions. Other than that, this is pretty much just exactly like a SID. Now, I'm not going to go into planning your descent because that varies from aircraft to aircraft. So that's something that's aircraft related. Reading these is very simple. So let's look at the notations we've already covered. We got another note, chart not to scale, narrative on following page. That just means the chart's not to scale. So just like before, we can't eyeball the distances. We have to use the distances it has published. Narrative on following page just means the text version's on the next page. And up here we have the frequencies that for Jacksonville approach. So Jacksonville approach control is on 190.0, 127.0, 322.4, 335.6 for all. If you're arriving into Jacksonville International from 270 to 090, so from basically the north side of the airport. If you could picture, maybe I can draw it on here if we get rid of that and that. So from 270 to 090, that means those frequencies there cover all of this. So if we're approaching Jacksonville from due west to north to due east, basically is what that means. So if we're approaching Jacksonville from the north at all, we're going to be on one of these approach frequencies. If we're approaching it from 181 to 269, so if we're in this sector here, our approach frequency is going to be either 123.8 or 377.05. And if we're approaching it from 191 to 180, then this sector, our approach frequency is going to be 124.9 or 308.4. That's just the frequencies you can expect. That proceeds more to lost comms and then anything else. Because in real life and in flight sim, it could be any one of them. You could be on someone else's frequency. I can tell you that 124.9 in this sector here covers Craig. But we could also be on 308.4. It also depends on what time of day we're arriving, because when it's at night, there's not much traffic. They may only have one guy working approach control. He'll be monitoring all these frequencies, but he may only be transmitting on one frequency. So yeah, reading these is not too terribly hard. You just have to be familiar with the standard symbology, which again is found across all charts, not just SIDS and stars. It's also on the en routes and the approaches. So again, just to reiterate, bold line is the procedure itself. Thin line is a transition. The altitude associated with the line is not a hard altitude. You don't have to be at it. It's just the minimum. And again, that minimum guarantees you terrain obstacle separation as well as nav aid reception. Let's see. And these crossing restrictions, the line indicates either at or above or at or below. So, yeah. Basically, what you want to do is find where the procedure starts, find your transition, and then just take your finger and trace along the line to get to the star. And then from the star, if it splits off, read the narrative to find out which one you'll be getting, depending on which runway is in use. We could get, just for simplicity, we'll say runway 8 again. And it says track to Kitso. So keeping one finger over Kipple, find Kitso, and then drag your line straight, your finger straight from Kipple over to Kitso. That's the transition you're going to be getting. So from Kipple, Kitso, C dot. And then from there, this approach. C dot, Quigu, Garden, runway 8. Alright, so that covers stars. Hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you next time.